Welcome to Mommispace, the podcast for moms of all stages. My name is Kay Jenin, and this podcast was created to give moms a voice to share their experiences and to share that there is not just one way to be a mom. This is a place where you can learn to love the woman inside the mother.
I started listening to this podcast called Radical Empathy, and you saying empathy, I was like, oh, she'll freaking love it. I think I told you that YouTube channel that I watch that's about the middle ground, and they get the two sides together to like increase empathy and understanding. They have a podcast where they take guests from that, and they just basically ask like for their story. And so even though he might not personally agree with them, like he wants to hear what happened with them. So one guy who grew up in like Mormon fundamentalism, and like he had 44 siblings, and he watched his dad like beat his mom and things like that. So he like grew up in a cult. He shares his story and how he realized like that's not the right way to live life. And it's just, I think it's really interesting to just hear people from different walks of life where you're like, wow, I have no filter or scope for that kind of life. Like I have not experienced that. And I think it's cool that this whole like media platform, I guess is what they would be, because they create videos in different segments, is to increase empathy in people and like increase understanding of one another. And I just, like you said, like in society today, that's what we need, is to understand one another and validate one another instead of being like, you're wrong. Like, I don't agree with you, so you're just wrong. You should check it out.
I grew up like understanding that everybody had a story, but I wish that we had taken it further and said, take a moment to get to know a little bit about that story.
Yeah. Like listen to the story.
Yes. Because it's one thing to know here and it's one thing to understand here. And when we understand here, then that person no longer is a stranger. They become an acquaintance. They become a friend. They become, a fellow church member. Whenever a relationship becomes more intimate, then we are less likely to carry out acts of aggression or abuse or bullying because they become a part of us.
Yeah.
And so,
seriously, think of how many white supremacists have never met anyone of color. Like that alone should just be evidence of like, it's a lack of understanding of people who are different. And you hear, oh my gosh, I don't remember his name. He was a guy he's black, and he would go to KKK meetings, and he ended up like converting tons of them out of the KKK just because he would talk to them. And he wasn't intimidated by the stupid things they would say. And he would just have those conversations, and they would come to his house, and he would meet with them for years. And then they'd be like, oh, this is stupid. And I think a lot of it was developing an understanding for other people. Like, what I've always known isn't actually reality. And sorry, I could go on and on, because I just think it's really interesting and powerful when you see that a lot of the world's problems are fixed when we try to sit and listen and understand, instead of just being like, no, I get it, and moving on. Like, no, you don't get it. You need to listen.
Yeah, because that discomfort, we don't like sitting in discomfort. We don't like having to not have the answers, or really, because we're so entitled, we're like, I don't need to do this. I can read about it, or I can go, like there's an easier way for me to gain this knowledge, but sitting in this discomfort sucks. So why would I subject myself to that?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people they just put a blanket statement of those people are this way. They're snowflakes. They're uneducated. They're whatever, so that we don't have to listen to them. So we invalidate them so that we don't have to deal with it. And
exactly.
All right. I want to tell you guys my favorite thing of the week, because we do this every single week. I tell you what I'm loving in my life. And this morning, I am drinking an iced coffee. So here's a shout out to iced coffee. Sometimes I'll do like product reviews or like suggestions or things I love that you can go buy. And sometimes I'm just going to give a shout out to the random things in my life that I love, like iced coffee. You obviously know where you can get some for yourself. There's nothing like the feeling of holding a cup of ice and coffee and cream and some sugar. And by some, I mean a lot. And it just makes you feel like you have your crap together, even when you don't. You could look like a hot mess, but you got that iced coffee in hand. And luckily, I live in a small town where we don't have like any kind of nice coffee shop chain, or even we have one coffee shop and it's pricey and it's not very accessible. It's hard to get in and get out. And so I don't spend all my money there. But oh gosh, I remember living in a bigger city, going every single day. There's just something so life-giving about it. And if it keeps me from spending $50 on Amazon every day, then I'll spend $4 on coffee every day. Anyway, that's my favorite thing of the week. And I want to encourage you, if you're just feeling like a hot mess today, go get yourself a nice coffee. I swear it'll turn your day around and you'll feel really good afterwards. Now that you know my favorite thing of the week, we're going to talk to my sweet, sweet friend, Melissa. Okay, friends, this is part 2 of my time with Melissa. Last week we talked about the Enneagram. If you did not listen to that episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. She is so good at talking about the Enneagram. Today we're talking about therapy, because if you didn't know, Melissa is a licensed therapist, and she's going to tell us mamas what steps to take if we want to start getting help, why we all should have a therapist, etc. We're going to talk about those kind of things, and I hope you love our time together.
All right, welcome to Mommispace. Thanks so much for listening again this week. We have Melissa again. She's my good friend, and she's tons of fun. She's an intentional mama. She always has something good to say, and she's a therapist. And I thought, why not talk about mental health with my fun therapist friend, Melissa? So, Melissa, thanks for joining us.
Always.
Will you just start off by telling us a little bit about your family and your work?
Yes, absolutely. So I have 4 kiddos. I have a husband of going on 13 years. And I recently went back over the last, I guess it was 4 years ago, and I received my graduate degree in social work. So I'm a master's level social worker. I work in a hospital setting and have been able to pilot a program that works with mamas and their babies.
Awesome. I guess let's just dive in quick. What are your passions, like in your career and in your home life? What are the things that really get you going?
So I love experiencing new things. And I have always, so whether it's traveling or trying new foods, like I'm the person that would like make something new every night, except it exhausts me in the same breath. And so I have to find the balance.
Yeah.
And just because I've always like sought out new things, I've always known that I wanted to work with women and children as a career. And so because I was so passionate about that, I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years because I thought, who better to pour into than my kiddos? And it was Brene Brown that gave me the confidence to go back and get further schooling so that on a professional level, I could help mamas and their babies thrive and have a voice and an advocate and someone in their corner.
Yeah, that's so good. So I was going to ask you, why did you become a therapist? But I think you feel like you answered that. I feel like you did.
Yes.
Okay, this is such a broad question, but would you give us some wisdom about mental health, like geared towards women and mamas?
Yeah. So when I was in grad school and when I was really diving into the research, so much of what we know is based off of studies done on men. Women have not even to this day comprised a large proponent of that patient population.
That's really
that is being researched and asked questions about. And so to this day, we are still very voiceless and unrepresented. Whether it's our mental health needs, our physical needs. I don't know how many of us out there have tried a workout regime that our husbands and male counterparts, like the weight seems to melt off of them. And we're still looking like we've gained 5 pounds while I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to, and it's not working for me. And so much of our society and what we have come to depend on was not catered to who we are internally and externally. And so there's still so much unanswered about how to be our healthiest, most vibrant self. And that is what motivates me. That's what helps get me up in the morning, is to make sure that not only myself and my daughter, but the women and children all over the world who are still unrepresented, even in the medical health field.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. In my experience having my son, I realized how much still like women don't matter in the medical world. It's like, it's really, and to me, I felt like it was in my head. I'm like, maybe I'm just being dramatic. Like, it can't be possible that even though we make up over half the population, we're just being disregarded. And it was pretty apparent that we were completely being disregarded in many ways. Like I had really bad migraines after they put me on a blood thinner twice a day that I wasn't supposed to be on. And these migraines were giving me stroke-like symptoms. It took weeks before they addressed it. Like, they were pretty unfazed by it. And then once they sent me to high risk OB, she was like, you're not even supposed to be on this. And like, blood thinners can cause anemia, which causes migraines. And she finally got me in with like an MRI to make sure I was fine. And so she took those steps, but it was kind of just completely ignored for a long time. And that's just like one little tiny piece of my prenatal care that was a disaster. And we're not even talking about like mental health, because, people are just crazy and emotional, and like, who cares? They're not actually depressed. They're just emotional and they need to get over it. And so I don't know, when you grow up, you have all this stuff you learn in school about how like doctors help you and the police protect you and all these things. And you just think anybody who's in authority is just like this amazing person, which there are a lot of really good people in those professions, but it doesn't mean it's perfect. And it doesn't mean that there's equal representation for everyone. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, wow, this really sucks growing up and being like, this is the real world. This isn't what we just learned in school or what you grow up believing in all those books, but you see it firsthand. And like, it's kind of undeniable. Sorry, I went off on a whole rabbit trail because I could get mad about it, but we're gonna stay fine. What do you think is something you've recognized that women or moms in general, something that I guess in the mental health world tends to be a commonality?
So I think specific to women, it's understanding the importance of our voice, of our intuition, of our softness, if you will. This is a word that's really been intriguing to me. We're taught to be tough and to be able to do it all and, roll with the punches, when really we can be soft and still do hard things. And we're not really taught or walked through how and what that looks like in our everyday life. Something as simple as saying no and not feeling guilty, something as generous as asking for help and not feeling like we're weak because we have to. So when I'm working with moms and there by their children, right? Because we empower a mom when we empower a family, is the idea that not only does your voice matter, but that you have a voice to begin with, because so many of them have been silenced, either through trauma, through upbringing, through the lack of role modeling. They don't even understand that they have a voice and that it's something that should be listened to. So I feel like that's one way in which it's something that is small but dynamic when given the opportunity to let blossom in someone's life. Yeah,
that's so good. Another aspect, I guess, of my prenatal care where I realized that I'd been silenced in a sense and not really empowered in my intuition is I felt super not at peace with the care provider I had at one point. And I was talking about that with someone, and it happened to be an older man. And he was like, well, you're just choosing that out of fear. Like, you're just living under fear. And I left that conversation and I cried because I was like, I'm a bad mom already. I am a bad Christian already. Like, I just felt like, oh, my emotions just took over. And after a couple weeks, I found out that my care provider was being investigated for malpractice because a baby had died under her care. And I found out she misprescribed me medication and was causing these migraines. And when I switched from her to somebody else, I had this peace again. And I realized that intuition as a mom and as a woman was valid and was completely on point. But I let somebody else convince me that my intuition was wrong, that my voice was wrong, my concerns were unholy even, and that I was being sinful essentially in how I was feeling. And after that, that oneness of anger, I was like, I'm never letting someone put me down again like that, or allow me to question what I'm sensing just because it might not translate to you, then I'm wrong. When this is my baby, I am the mama bear in charge of this cub, and my feelings matter, and that internal voice matters. And I think that's so true because I've witnessed that in myself, where I feel like I'm a pretty liberated young woman, and I feel I grew up in a family that really did not make me feel any different than my brother. Probably actually put women above men sometimes to a negative sense. But I grew up in a really powerful, yay women kind of family, but yet still in the world that we live in, so many times you just feel like, oh, I'm too emotional, or, oh, it's just my feelings. It's not reality. I'm just being fearful when we're supposed to have this intuition. And I got angry and decided I'm not going to do that. I think I'm totally affirming what you're saying, because I'm that's in my own life. I'm not addicted to drugs, but I feel okay, I'm on that page. I don't know. Have you ever had an experience like that where you feel the world, or maybe somebody in your life was just no, you're wrong, but then you discovered actually my womanness was right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had 3 home births, and I had 1 hospital birth, all with midwives. And I remember with my first, like I said, I was a young mama. I felt like I knew everything and yet nothing all at the same time. And so I remember wanting to have a home birth for my first experience at, birthing. Mm-hmm. And my mom was just adamantly against that. And at that point, not only was she my best friend, but we were literally like 2 peas in a pod. So what she said, I quickly parroted because I didn't know myself outside of our relationship. And so I remember questioning and not having a peace about doing a hospital birth. And out of all of my kids' births, I can look back and know that I was 1,000% right. Hospital births are just not my jam at all. Mm-hmm. I don't like strangers walking in. I don't care what your credentials are. You're bringing in a different energy, and I need to be completely focused on what's happening in my body, and I need to be able to trust every person, because everybody that walks into your personal space, you are ultimately trusting them, right? And so,
especially when you're when you're in labor, you're not in your right mind. You are I realized after the fact how many details slipped my perception that like later I could analyze and be like, that's what was happening. And all these people, it's like being drunk in a group of people. Like you're trusting them to take care of you.
Yes. And they don't know you from anyone and you don't know them. You
Yeah.
have no personal ties. You've never met before. And so, I mean, I have all 4 of my children and so grateful for that. But in one of the most important decisions, I allowed someone else's intuition to overtake mine.
Yeah.
And whenever I've allowed that to happen in my life, it never results in me feeling no regret after the fact. Like there's always a part of me that's like, but I was right. I know for me and my truth that I was right in that moment. And I needed to advocate for myself and say, I understand that you can disagree with me, but I'm still going to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And that's something, even as a 30-something-year-old, that I still have my toe in, and I'm still learning what that looks like to not overstep anyone else's boundaries, but to keep mine firm as well.
Yeah, that's so good. I think one thing I've been telling Chris, I've been struggling with in recent time, I've noticed in myself is I hate having to advocate for myself. Like I'm mad about it. And I'm like, I don't like that I have to advocate for myself in every arena of my life. Like I'm just mad. And I'm an oldest. So if you believe in birth order, so I feel that oldest either love taking care of people and they grow up to always take care of whoever they're in relationship with, or they're like me and they resent everyone for having to take care of them. I'm like, I don't want to take care of anybody else. I don't want to even have to advocate for myself. Like someone take care of me. Clearly I care about it a little bit, but lately I've just been so mad. I'm like, I shouldn't have to advocate for myself to my spouse. I shouldn't have to do it to my family. I shouldn't have to do it like people need to check on me. And it's something that I'm working through is like how to be comfortable with the fact that people can't read your mind. People don't inherently know what you need. And so, yeah, you have to advocate in a sense of communication with those around you, but also like working with my spouse on how can he help make that a little less stressful for me. And so that's something that I think for me right now is really relevant. Am I weird? This is turning into like a K counseling session.
No, I'm the eldest as well. My family ended up adopting 6 kids out of foster care. So I was displaced, but also still held as the most responsible out of all my siblings. So I was always the eldest, even when like numerically, I was no longer, the eldest, which is interesting, complex as well. Yeah. But I completely go through decision fatigue as well. And so what that looks like for me is I don't even want to decide what we're having for dinner. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that question feels so incredibly intrusive at the end of the day when I'm already like going through all these different decisions because I'm an anxious person and everything is like I categorize it and I think about it and I ponder it, and like the simplest things become this really complex interaction in my brain. And so my husband, when he wants to bless me, will say, what do you want to have for dinner? And I push it back on him and I'm like, anything that's edible. Like I don't want to make this decision because I need my brain to just be quiet for a little bit and not even think through all these different options and shuffle them through. So I completely am in the same boat as you.
Yeah, I can't do it after a while. And it's funny because my husband and I are youth pastors, and we have different eldest, and it's funny because you can just tell that they're the eldest. And my little sister goes to our youth group too, and she's the youngest. And this student we have who's the eldest, and he's bitter about life like me, they'll say something like, oh, that wasn't my fault. And we'll be like, yeah, I know it wasn't because you're the youngest. Or like, I didn't do it. And we're like, yeah. And we just like, it's just funny because we blanket statement like those youngest ones. And he's funny because his mom and I have talked about it. Once he had like that third sister, she said he stopped cuddling with everyone. He like got kind of like, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And ever since then, he's just like, I'm done taking care of people. People need to figure it out. And it's like, even as a little kid, he was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm not doing it. And I relate so much where you're just like,
Yes.
I don't want to take care of people.
Yes.
Anyway, that's just me. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest. What I wanted to go towards next is, what resources do you personally recommend for moms specifically when it comes to mental health? Like, and I was thinking too, like your favorite books on self-growth, but also when it comes, oh gosh, we'll start there. What are your favorite books or resources or podcasts when it comes to like self-growth for moms?
Yeah. So I'm not really into like self-help books or anything.
Yeah.
Like if that's your jam, like you do you, boo. I love it. Whatever is going to bring you life. For me, journaling is one of the best ways in which I grow. Like being able to externally process that which I'm experiencing internally is deeply therapeutic to me. And so I've had a journal since I was like 5, and I've kept all of them through all of our like
That's
millions
awesome.
of moves since I've been married. And it's my go-to. I can do it at any time. I have had a variety of sizes. Some are blank, some are lined. Like, so, and as a mother, I found I didn't have time to read both fiction and nonfiction as much as I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I rely a lot on podcasts right now, and just really, really insightful Instagram therapists and or, counselors, because I can it's easily digestible, and it's something that can impact the rest of my day. And I didn't have to give up hours and hours to get to that insight.
That's good.
So I've had to really like compartmentalize and, get like the biggest bang for my buck so that I could be my best self, but also have something to give to my kids and husband.
Yeah.
So, the biggest thing though, I would say is once I got an individual therapist, like game changer. I'm not talking about like going to my really insightful best friends and having a heart to heart, because that is also life-giving, but someone who is completely biased, who will call me on any and all of it. Because the thing is, I'm a therapist now too. And my counselor will say, okay, you're not the therapist. Like, you don't have to take care of things right now, because I go into that space so quickly, right?
Yeah.
I go into Enneagram 2, which is the helper. And so I'm like, well, I have to come up with all of this. And she's like, nope, you get to just be.
Yeah.
And you get to process, and you get to have this freedom of speech that you get to experience for this next hour to 2 hours. And so I believe that everybody benefits from a therapist. My kids have been in therapy from a very young age. My husband, we've done marriage counseling. I am who I am today because therapy has been such an integral part in it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you too, because I think, like you said, self-help books, they only go so far. They can be inspirational. I think that's the best thing, is they can inspire a change, but they're not going to get you to the same place as meeting with a therapist, someone who's licensed and they have this ability to see outside the scope that you can see in, right? Because as you read a book, you're reading it through your filter, and you're not, the places you don't want to go to, you're not gonna go to, because that book can't be like, hold up, like you're like reading around those words. So I think it's great. Like if it, like you said, if it brings life and it makes you feel inspired and it helps you kind of overcome your personal issues, great. But going that next step, I think, is important too. One of my friends challenged me recently, because I keep telling everybody I want to get a therapist, but I'm just scared to make that call, and I don't know how to figure out insurance and all these things. And my friend was like, okay, every week I'm going to text you now to make sure you got a therapist in that week's time. And I was like, crap, I don't like letting people down. So I'm like, okay, now I have to, because she's going to ask, and I don't want to like have to come up with a bad excuse. And so that's something we're working through right now and figuring out my husband and I schedule. Because mainly I was like, well, let's just start with the marriage stuff. Some people start the other end of it, but I think if I start with our relationship, that kind of almost gives me an incentive. And the incentive should be to like be able to live in my body with more peace. But the greater incentive to me is to be able to be a good wife and have a long-lasting marriage and be able to set that example for our kids. So that's something I'm working through. But I want you to kind of speak to the mom who's like, okay, I want to get a therapist. What am I supposed to do? Like, how do I do it? Because I think that sets so many people back is, how do you know I'm scared of meeting with someone and wasting my time and they weren't the right person. So what's your advice to moms who are like, I want to meet with someone, but I don't know what to do?
Yeah. So I was very much like UK. So my first experience meeting with a therapist was a marriage counselor. My husband and I went together. And so, because I was able to get by before I got married, right? Like I could have a really deep, full, insightful conversation with a friend of mine. They could challenge me and I could kind of coast after that, you know?
Yeah.
I had a greater depth of awareness, but it was still just me that I was taking care of. And if I was feeling like a crappy person, I could just hang out in my bedroom and say, hey, I'm not up for going out tonight. And then when I had more energy.
Because once you get married, you're like, there's nowhere to hide.
Yes. I remember the very first fight I had with my husband. And I went into my bedroom was what I processed it as. And I shut the door and I sat on my bed. And a couple minutes later, he came in and I was like, time out. I need my space. And he was like, okay, but like, this is our bed. Like, do you want me to leave? And I was like, oh, like I have to step up. I don't have time to just pout and sulk and, you know, play my really sad music right now. I have to address this sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And so it was like my first aha moment that I was doing life with someone for the rest of my life. And what did that look like moving forward? And so we, at that point, were living in Colorado. We're both from the Midwest. I had no connections with therapists or mental health at all. And I literally just like did a Google search for marriage counselors in my area. And we wanted to see a Christian therapist at that time. And a lot of the Christian therapists weren't covered by insurance at the time. And so it was something that we felt like was worth investing in, even if we had to pull money from this other area.
Yeah.
And so we prayed about it and I clicked on someone's name. I liked her bio, I think. And I read through all these different bios and I was like, oh, I respond to her. And so she ended up being amazing. We met, I think, 3 or 4 times. And she was like, you guys can use me as needed, but I feel like you've gotten over the hurdle that you came to me for. And it was a beautiful experience. And then you fast forward now, like, I don't know, 8, 9 years. And websites are so intuitive now. Mm-hmm. You can click on them. You see what insurances they cover. You see that they can do self-pay. You can read, again, the bios of these individuals.
Yeah.
And just knowing the biggest thing, because I get asked so much about therapists, who should I see? And the therapist that I see now, I did ask all of my therapist friends, who would you guys recommend? Don't go to someone that you know, because it's just a conflict of interest, but utilize, if you know someone who's in therapy or counseling, like, who do you like? Who, you know, whose name is tossed about? And then also give yourself grace. If you do not meld well with the first therapist that you interact with, keep it moving. Like, thank them for your time.
Paying them.
Yes. But it's the idea that, like, one negative experience should not put you off for the rest of your life to receiving the care that you need in order to help your holistic health, because your mental health is part of your physical health. We know that anxiety and stress has a physical impact on our bodies.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just investing in a different area. And just like with the doctor, you paid for their services, but it doesn't mean that you have to keep seeing them, because there's other GPs out there. There's other, you know, OBGYN.
While I was pregnant, that was the first time I realized I don't have to put up with care that isn't life-bringing for me, that isn't my standard. And then I think for me, just setting my expectations that it's not soul-crushing if the first person we meet with doesn't click. Just like have healthy expectations that maybe maybe the first one will be great and it'll be amazing, and maybe they won't be, and that's okay. Like you said, thank them for their time and then move on, and do that until somebody really meshes well. And I think that's making me feel more at peace, is knowing you can just move on. It's not a waste of time. You're trying to figure it out. You would never say dating people is a waste of time until you find your spouse. Like that's not how it works. People don't waste each other's time. We all are affecting each other, and maybe they're just teaching me, I don't like that style. But that's making me feel more not so frozen and paralyzed, like I can't do it, but like, yes, you can. Just take it one step at a time and move forward. It is weird that it's so hard for people to see a therapist. I love therapy. I think therapy is great. I would advocate for it to people, but yet when I start to do it for myself, it's all of a sudden like you're just frozen and you're like, I can't do it. And it's just so odd to me that the thing that is going to bring that change is the thing that you're like, I don't know how to do this.
Because it comes with the fear of, what if nothing changes? What if I stay the way that I am right now? Once you put yourself out there, you're opening yourself up for rejection.
Yeah, I think it's that rejection.
If anything is terrifying. And that's why we stay where we're at, because we get comfortable with not feeling good. Because we're used to that. We're used to, and we don't know what it feels like, or if there's even life available on the other side. And so, just asking yourself, what lesson did I learn through this experience? Was it that I can advocate for myself even with a professional? Is it that one nugget that they told me, that they helped reveal to me, was something that I've been carrying around for the last 30 years? Like, whatever lesson you were supposed to learn, take that as the treasure that it was. And either stick with that therapist or move on to someone else, because there's someone out there who is going to connect very deeply with you as a mental health provider.
That's good. I think for me, I've been identifying for myself that one of the things I'm most afraid of is being in a Christian circle. We had to do premarital counseling. We did it with a couple different couples, and we've done not formal marriage counseling, but like meeting with pastors and stuff, just as like a requirement for working places. And I'm very open like you are, and Chris isn't. And so when we've shared with people, he's completely fine with me sharing. But when I do, a lot of the responses I've gotten from completely unqualified people, you and I have talked about this with the church world, is people with good intentions who are completely unqualified ruin people's lives and cause terrible mental health issues because they don't know what the heck they're doing. But that's happened to me, where I'll say, okay, this happens when Chris and I are fighting and I don't know what to do about it, because Chris has a really hard time overcoming he gets really cruel because he's like, I can't deal with this, so I'm just going to make them shut up. And I'm like, I don't know how for like us to overcome this. And every single person has told me that it's because I'm probably just being too aggressive or too naggy or too anxiously attached. They don't say it in that word, but nobody's ever once addressed Chris in any of it. And he'll say, yeah, I do that. But because I am seen as a talkative woman, and I'm not saying everything is a male-female thing, but in the church sometimes it is. Everybody has told me it was my fault for having high expectations in my relationship with Chris, asking for communication, asking for more. That is like not okay to do. And I think I discovered for myself, I'm really scared of having that be the answer again, and that nobody actually deals with the problem. They just tell me like, it's your fault because you're the woman, and how could your husband do anything wrong? He's just being a man. It's fine. Leave him alone. And that's what we're told, is like, no, it's okay that he doesn't talk about his feelings. It's okay that the way he deals with his feelings are not healthy, but you need to just shut up. And those are people I trusted. Those are people that I'm like, okay, they have good marriages. They're Christians. They love Jesus. They're hearing from the Lord. And that's the answer I get. And so it's very interesting, like going back to just how even in the church, even if we say like, oh, women and men are equal, we still have that twisted way of how we think of a woman's role as a wife. And it's like, no, it's your fault because you're the woman, and how could he be wrong? Even though he's admitting, no, I did it wrong, they're still like, that can't be true.
Yeah, yeah, because it kind of goes back full circle to where we started. Women in our society are not taught to have a voice. And even when they find their voice, they are told that it is not as good or even on the same level as a man's. And so we're not taught to validate ourselves. And so when we hear someone else invalidating us, it's like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, you know what? I probably shouldn't have said that last thing. Or yeah, my expectations are really hard. And this is probably why my kids are behaving like this, because we take it all on.
Yeah.
And we don't know when to say, I hear what you're saying. I don't think that fits my situation, but thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And then find someone else who is qualified.
Yeah, correct. And that's so good. Is like friends who are insightful are great to have in our life, but they're not the same as a therapist. And don't get it twisted that somebody who's not been through that level of training, they can be great, and maybe they should do it so that they can be trained and qualified, but it's not the same. Even though it might feel good, it's not the same. And there's so much farther you can go when you go to somebody who has that natural giftedness combined with the education behind it, in my humble opinion.
Yes.
Goodness. Okay. I just want to say thank you, because I felt like that was really life-giving for me. And I feel, again, inspired to actually go find a therapist and not keep dragging my feet. I really am. I'm just so scared. But yeah, you made me be like, okay, pull it together. So thank you so much for sharing with us, and just thank you for your heart on it, and just the clarity and compassion that you bring to it. And thanks for chatting with us.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check out all of the goodness from today's episode on the show notes, and share this with a friend if it impacted you in any way. You can also leave a review on iTunes so that other mamas can join the movement of loving the woman inside the mother. Join our online Mommispace community every day by following us on Instagram at Mommispace, so you can interact with me and other mamas, be encouraged, and give your valuable input on how to make this community even more safe and inspiring for mamas all over the world. All my love to you, mama. You are enough.